This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Today is May 21st, 2018, and I'm interviewing Diana Folsom, a painter and director of digital collections at Gilcrease Museum. We're at Diana's house in Tulsa. Diana, you're a Choctaw tribal member who formerly worked at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. This is my first chance to see your art in person, and it's wonderful. I've been so impressed. And I look forward to learning more about you and your work. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you here.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in San Diego, California, and grew up there. Went to high school and college at San Diego State. And then I left for graduate school to New York, to Manhattan, and went to Hunter College, where I got a degree in painting.
And we're going to talk some more about that. What did your folks do for a living?
My father was a chemical engineer. He had degrees in physics and math, or maybe it was, I'm going to have to stop that. I'm not sure if it was physics. What was it?
Strong science.
Chemistry.
Okay.
Chemistry and math. Okay.
And your mom?
And my mom was an elementary school teacher. So she taught for 35 years and loved third grade the most. So she was a wonderful teacher.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother. His name is Diana Folsom, and he now lives in Tulsa also.
Oh, how neat. What was your relationship with your grandparents on either side?
Let's see. Relationship with my father's parents was a good relationship. They knew that they were from Oklahoma. They knew that my grandfather was of Choctaw heritage, but they did not know much more about their family than that. And they were just very quiet, very kind of silent people. My grandmother was most concerned about my religious explorations. That's what she was the most worried about and what she communicated the most to me about. So, and then on my mother's side, all four of my grandparents are from this region, from about 2 hours, mostly east of Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother, my mother's side, Alta Porter, was from Mountainburg, Arkansas. And then my grandfather, the man that she married, Stephen Otis Porter, was from, I'm not sure how you say this, Bacoshi, Oklahoma?
I'm not sure either.
I'm not sure either. I think that's how you say it. And, yeah.
What was the creative environment in your family like growing up?
I think that probably, I would say that my mother was very creative. She loved design, and she painted when she was in college. There's a painting in the living room, you can see. My father wrote poetry, but he was so concerned with never being poor again that he took a very practical route. He served in the Navy in World War II, and after that he got his bachelor's degree from Hardin-Simmons University in 3 years, again in the difficult subjects of chemistry and math. And he was just bound and determined to have a good, successful life. But they were supportive of my art. They didn't discourage me, but they wanted to be sure that I could be a teacher as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think you sort of talked a little about your relationship to Choctaw identity and culture growing up. And maybe the church was part of that.
Yes, I would say the strongest driving force in both of my parents' families and in their identity and interests would be with the church, really Christianity. And they both met, my mom and dad met in the Southern Baptist Church in San Diego and got married there. And those are really lifelong friends, all those people that they met during those days. I would say that they just always had a very deep spiritual connection to the universe and to God, and it was interesting for me to later learn that my great-great-grandfather David Folsom was a force in bringing Christianity to the Choctaw. So that explained a lot of that strong heritage and strong passion for religion in my family.
Right. So, what is your first memory of seeing Native art, however you might define it?
I'm not sure that I remember seeing very much Native art as I was growing up, but a very, very strong, no, this actually touches me. Strong memory for me is seeing the catalog for the show Hero Hawk and Open Hand, and seeing for the first time the ancient iconography, signs and symbols related to my heritage, and seeing the work of Jerry Redcorn. So I really tried to find out everything I could learn about her. And this was way before anyone contacted me about a job in Oklahoma. I never imagined that this would happen, and it became really important to me to put together a project once I learned that we had this amazing collection at the Gilcrease Museum of these beautiful ceramic vessels made by our ancestors, to put together a project related to those works, and to be able to really learn about them and to learn about that part of our heritage has just been really meaningful to me.
Yeah, it's such an impressive project, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail too. What is your first memory of making art?
Gosh, I've made art pretty much for all of my life. In elementary school, we were lucky in San Diego that they had quite extensive extracurricular programs in art and classes. Back then, we had classes all the time, every day in art. So it was not hard to gain experiences and to just really, I've always really enjoyed it and loved it. And it was at age 14 that I somehow felt struck by, I don't know what it was, like it was a bolt of lightning or something, that I wanted to be an artist. It was a very romantic idea, I think. but
that's when
happened.
you knew.
Yes, yes.
Was it at a particular, do you remember the moment, or was it just, it happened sometime when you were 14? Was it triggered by anything?
I'm not sure. I have a memory, but it doesn't quite jive with the year. But I have a memory of being in a class with a teacher, Mr. Matola, I think was his name. And he was so inspiring that that's when I made that quiet decision. But I kept it to myself. I was very quiet about it.
When did you sell your first piece of art?
Gosh, that's a good question. The one that I remember was after I finished college at San Diego State. Okay. I was working my way through graduate school at Hunter College in New York, and I was back home and had a show, and the woman who ran the gallery sold a painting, and it paid for my tuition. So I was that was memorable. So
that's fantastic. So you make this quiet decision that you do want to be an artist, and you are taking art throughout school, pretty much. But you decide to go to San Diego State, and had you told your parents you were going to declare yourself an art major?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, and they were okay with it as long as it was related to teaching, so that I could do something practical. Right.
What kind of a base did you get at SDSU?
I think it was a very good, solid, and practical base. They taught, traditional painting and drawing, but they also were progressive enough that that they were teaching abstraction as well and about color. We often thought at that time the big differences between San Diego State, SDSU, and UCSD was that the University of California, San Diego was much more theoretical and conceptual, and San Diego State was more just practical in a way, I guess you would say. So I did have the degree in art for secondary education. So I took some of everything because I wanted to explore everything. Painting, drawing, sculpture. Didn't do very much printmaking, but some woodcuts. Did a little bit of ceramics. But then gradually, by my junior and senior year, I was focusing on painting, and that felt right to me. I also I minored in music and dance, so all the practical things, right? And so I wondered if perhaps I would get engaged in more theatrical productions, and I loved attending many of them, but I was also impatient with them, and I was shy. So I liked the nonverbal arts. I liked doing dance and music, but I found that my ideas weren't of that dimension. They were just more on that two-dimensional surface.
Well, and were you drawn to abstraction already at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think that I've always thought kind of abstractly.
So at Hunter's College, I read that you got your master's degree on a woman artist who used crushed rayon, lentils, paste, etc. in her paintings to give them this real tactile dimensionality.
Yes, Joan Snyder.
Joan Snyder. And what impact did that research have on your work?
And I got to meet her in person at that time as well, which was wonderful. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. Her work was very tactile and thick, painterly, gloppy, messy, gutsy, feeling kind of work. And back during that time, in the mid to late 70s, that was considered not quite as good as the more conceptual, minimal, cleaner, perhaps you might say, cleaner work. And something about the passion of it, I guess, and the emotion of it that I related to. And perhaps it felt, in a way, maybe female for me or feminine to me, I'm not sure. But it was an issue during those times.
She was going against the current.
Yes, that was well said, yes.
Yeah. How often were you coming back to Oklahoma periodically? Did you have that kind of in the summers you came back to visit?
I had only been here twice.
Okay.
So we really didn't come back much at all, although my father continued to stay in touch with cousins and such. And one part of the family, some cousins moved to San Diego also. So much of the family moved to San Diego for jobs. And they then moved back to Dibble, actually, which is not too far from Blanchard, which is near Norman, you probably know.
Right.
So they're the family members that I feel closest to still here in Oklahoma, because we've had that a consistent relationship since I think they might have lived with us a little bit in San Diego, and then we kept up with them when they moved back. So,
what were your plans after graduating from Hunter? What were you planning on doing?
That was a good question. I wanted to continue my painting no matter what, and I must say that I did have a professor at San Diego State who said to his female artists, some days he said, "Why are you wasting your time? You're just gonna get married and have babies and not paint anymore." And that perhaps galvanized me a bit. And I wanted to be sure that I didn't know if I would have babies or get married or not, but I definitely wanted to keep painting no matter what. And so that I've done. But I wasn't sure how I would make a living along the way. And I worked in a gallery here and there. And I had a summer internship in between semesters of graduate school. It was out at the Naval Air Station, North Island. It was for a computer-based training company. And I worked as an illustrator for them. And then when I moved back to San Diego after graduate school, started working for them again. And there was a company that whose work I really believed in. And they were wonderful people, educational psychologists, instructional designers, working with technology. And that's how I got into technology. And I've been in technology pretty much ever since.
I was going to say, you're coming in to do the illustration, but you're being introduced to this technology early in its development, pretty early.
Yes.
How neat.
Yes, so, yeah, you never know how things will. And so then I got involved. I do have to tell you this one story. Would go to New York after moving back to San Diego. I'd still go to New York at least once a year and to see shows and friends. And I went to New York and was on a bus between JFK and the city, and the bus broke down. So another bus came along to get all of us strays onto the second bus and go into the city. And there was one seat left on the bus, and I happened to be sitting next to the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And he was a witty, entertaining, fascinating guy. We had this really interesting conversation on the way in and exchanged cards, and I put him in my art mailing list, and we stayed in touch over the course of some years. And then as he would call me from time to time for advice as they were starting to do more technology projects at LACMA. So he called me one day also looking for someone to take a position as an educator in his department, to train people in using the systems, because they had some very unusual computer systems. And so I thought, I don't know those systems, but I think I might be interested in that. So we had a big project at Courseware. Courseware was the name of the company where I worked, and love those people to this day. We were working on a project for Apple computers at the time, some I think instructional manuals, and so we worked all night to get that job done, and then drove the next day to Los Angeles and for the job interview, and got the job, and that got me started in the museum business in the world of technology.
That's a great story. You were meant to sit next to each other.
Yes. Isn't that funny?
You were a painter as well. Well, when and how did you meet your husband?
That's another good story. This is actually my third husband. My first two husbands are wonderful men also, and I've been very lucky that they have all been very, very supportive of my artwork. And the fellow I'm married to now, William Matthews, we were introduced by our hairdresser. So, and I was really not looking for a new relationship, and I was pretty resistant. So she tried to introduce us for a year or two, but I didn't know it was for anything other than just an artist meeting an artist. So
in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, yes. And so he called at one point to suggest we meet up for lunch, but I was really busy, and it was around Christmas time, so I didn't have time to call him back. So I didn't call him back. I figured he could wait. So and he called me after the first of the year, but he called on my home phone, and I lived in a loft downtown, and it was a great environment, and he sounded so nice on the phone. I thought, well, this is surprising. She gave him my home number, but I guess I better call him back. So we had lunch, and when I met him, I thought, oh, he's cute and he's about the right age, and He does this wonderful artwork based on the poems of Pablo Neruda, and I love poetry, and I love Neruda, and so anyway, it took some time, but we eventually got together.
Oh, that's a very neat story too. Thanks for sharing that. So, you sort of already mentioned one of your I was going to ask when and how you made your first sort of important gallery connections.
Gosh, I've had different kinds of gallery relationships over the years. The first ones in San Diego were so really lovely people. I've forgotten her name, the name of the first gallery. Then I was involved with Rebecca Cabo Gallery in La Jolla, California, which was really nice as well. I don't know if I remember other gallery names in San Diego. And then in Los Angeles, we worked with Double Vision Gallery, which was a lovely gallery near LACMA, and then in Bergamot Station, Lois Lambert Gallery, and my husband worked with her first on her more functional art side. She also has the Gallery of Functional Art, and she's a wonderful, charismatic, eccentric dealer who's still doing really well in Los Angeles. And then I got quite involved with the Korean art community. Koreatown, we call it K-Town, is right next to LACMA. In fact, now it's somewhat surrounding it as well. And I was, I think I had some art in a show in some office building across the street from LACMA, and met a Korean artist there, and she was really nice, and she invited me to be in a show at Gallery Western on Western Avenue. And she, they were just enthusiastic and kind, and the dealer is very nice, and she still has her gallery there on Western Avenue. And got invited to do a couple of shows in Korea and Seoul, and so it's just kind of been an evolution, kind of serendipitous evolution, I guess you might say.
Yeah, and that's such a neat, because you haven't seen Changing Hands yet. You haven't been exploring that yet when you meet the Korean artists. But I'm just thinking what a great opportunity that is to sort of absorb and be, somewhat influenced maybe by a different kind of aesthetic, and then you're bringing your aesthetic to it also.
Yes, and one of the interesting things about many of the Korean artists that I've met is that they are often incorporating traditional ways with contemporary ways, with new ways, both in terms of the media that they use, handmade paints, handmade paper, rice paper, and also their iconography and shapes and symbols and traditions. So that's interesting to see that similarity. I feel I see some similarities with the work of Native artists that I've been getting to know in Oklahoma.
And there's a tactile dimension that you like there too.
I do like that.
What was that experience like of being over there?
Oh gosh, it's just been wonderful. And the artists and the people were so warm and generous and helpful, and visited artist studios and dragon kiln firings of beautiful ceramic vessels of ceramic artists. I just felt very comfortable there in a way, although I don't speak the language, so that is a challenging element. But there is a great deal of sensitivity, and art is an important part of their lives, and a part of their, I think more as with our own Native American traditions, a part of everything they touch, what they think about what they do, it has beauty and sensitivity and a feeling of the spirit in it, I think.
So it looks like also I was seeing from maybe your resume that you ended up with a number of these are your earlier paintings from the 80s and 90s, and they're being purchased by corporations.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, some of the dealers that I worked with in San Diego and one in New York were successful in having corporate placement and such. Excuse me. My favorite story is there was a competition by a gallery in San Diego. I'll have to see if I can remember the name of the gallery. But they had sort of two sizes, a small size and large size paintings that they wanted to make into prints for a hotel. I think it was Hotel Intercontinental. And so I was awarded the project and made, small size, which was made into beautiful prints and a huge painting. And, I thought that was great. And then I got a call from an elementary school friend, 6 months, a year later, who happened to be staying in the Hotel Continental. And she said, "Diana, I went to the bathroom and I saw your name on the wall." There was a beautiful print that was made by you. So I was in every bathroom in the Hotel Intercontinental in San Diego at one point. I guess that was an honor. I think.
So you did this series, Woman as River, and is that when you first started working soil into your pigments and resins? And what were your thoughts about that process? How did that come about?
Yes, you're very observant. That is when it first started happening, and I had been using a material called Saltillo. I don't know, I haven't seen it in Oklahoma yet, but it's more prevalent in maybe Southern California and Southwest and such, because tiles are made out of that material and such. But it's used as almost a cement-like material, but I think it's related to more clay-like. So I've been using Saltillo, which I liked a lot, but kind of like a plaster, more cement, the way it operated. And as I was really trying to assess what I thought was important about my work, I felt that what was most me was the sort of fluid, lyrical passages of the paintings that I had done over the decades. And so I began thinking about the concept of rivers and that women are like a river, and I feel like my life path is like the journey that one would take on a river. And so I started experimenting a little bit more. I think it was when I was particularly at the Vermont Studio Center, though I found some beautiful clay from the river there that another artist had gathered already. It was just, it was in a container in the sculpture studio, so that I'd try it out. And it really caused me to want to do more with clay in particular and make paint out of it. So I just mix it with one of the mediums. Usually it's the Golden's GAC 100. I mix the clay with that. So it's, if I get the right mixture. I'm not a very scientific person about mixing the proportions, but I work pretty hard to make sure that there's enough of the GAC 100 so that it doesn't fall off, so that it's permanent on the painting. So, and so I looked for many different female shapes in paintings and in magazines, and made those the river forms. But then I also used some beautiful books of satellite views of the Earth that were given to me by Yves-André Laramé, who's an important sculptor and installation artist today. And will mention that I discovered her. She was my student at San Diego State, she was a physical science major and a fantastic student in my Art 2A design class. And I talked her into becoming an artist. So we were lifelong friends. And so I continue to learn from her, I think, way more than she ever learned from me. And during one of our visits, she gave me a stack of these big, beautiful books of the satellite views of the Earth. And so I study those. I still study those and continue to learn from them and try to emulate the processes and the way the colors separate or merge or flow, but using my own shapes.
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, and we didn't talk about your residency at the Vermont studio, but I think that was in 2006. What was it? Did you have a project in mind when you accepted the residency or when you applied for it?
That you're not required to have a particular project, so I just wanted to really be able to focus on painting for that whole month, which was really a gift, both to just have the time to paint and be in that beautiful environment and around so many talented and generous artists and writers. A lot of writers go there as well.
Oh, that's right. So it's the multidisciplinary kind of aspect of it.
Yes, which was really great, and so that helped me move forward more with using clay and then earth from places that were important to me as I experimented there.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about your 2010 show, Materials of the Universe, but I was wondering if you wouldn't mind reading your amazingly precocious poem that you wrote in the 5th grade first, because I think it sets up the series so nicely, and maybe it's in the program too, but I printed out your poem.
Don't remember, but it's just curious to me that I feel that this kind of not only sets up that show, but it makes all of my work make sense.
Yes, I agree.
Even some exhibitions that I've had in the past where they were 8 feet tall triangular paintings, white at the top, narrow at the bottom. I've just been thinking about this over the last years, that it was still the same thing, reaching to the sky and connecting earth and sky. So here's the poem. I think I called it kind of a boring title, right? Comparisons, was that it?
That's awful. I didn't print the title, and I wish I had, but yes, no, I think you're right. I think it was Comparisons.
So both flower and star are similar. A flower is a star on earth. A star is a flower in the sky. Both at first are lonely. One star in a valley of blackness, one flower in a sea of green. Then others come up. Both are created by someone above, the star with its golden rays, the flower with its golden petals.
Thank you. So yeah, just to pursue that line of discussion for a moment, the idea of these correspondences and the idea of connections between these 3 levels of existence. And I think your scientific background, I feel like it shows up in your work in this really poetic way.
I am very interested in science, although I'm not a science geek, but I'm interested in the big ideas, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I do love the ideas behind, how the earth was formed and stars and what the dirt is that's on the earth, as I think everyone knows now that the dirt on the earth was stardust. Mm-hmm. And so some of my paintings try to kind of embody that idea a little more closely. Some of the diptychs, like one in the living room, I'll have to show you. But I think what we are understanding more and more about through science is just magical and poetic, just on its own. It's hard to do much more than almost illustrate the ideas. So that's difficult for me sometimes, I think. I like to use these ideas or iconography or an ancient star map and then flood it with paint and try to imbue it with the lyrical feeling that I have about it, I guess. So.
Well, and I'm also just always struck, like the native storytelling traditions, about marriages between people and stars and all those things that in fact are so true on this very, very, very basic level, and now being borne out, by some of these discoveries. It's
I just love that. I just love that. So yes, I really feel that strong connection to the stars and the sky, and I believe those stories. I love those.
Rich material.
Yes.
You were a visiting artist, I guess, at Rollins State College in Florida for a little bit. What did that bring to your work? It's a completely different part of the country.
Yes, in Florida, it was a few days, and that came about because the artist the professor who brought me there was an artist I met at the Vermont Studio Center.
Uh-huh.
Rachel. There were two Rachels I met at the Vermont Studio Center. Wonderful women, Rachel Sussman and Rachel. It's the other Rachel. I'm going to have to.
We can put it in
get her
brackets.
Last name in that. Yes. And so she brought me in and mainly gave a talk about my work, and brought all the little square paintings there. I think it was much of the show that I had in Korea. And then I also gave some talks and helped with a couple of classes, gave a couple classes as well. So I loved the feeling of the air and being around the water. I love that. Landscape is really, really important to me. And so that is always something that is like another player in the scene or in the work that we're doing. I think that it was the enjoyment I had at working with the students that I came away with as being really important and of value to me. I really like working with different generations and learning from them. They learn from us. And it's curious because that idea must have been, since that connection must have been in the universe, because it was not too long after that I got the call about coming to Tulsa and being part of the University of Tulsa and Gilcrease Museum. So started working with students intensely.
Right, and that's a great opportunity, I think, to talk about the project, the digital project, the digitizing of these, perhaps the ancient pottery. Maybe just to tell us a little bit about.
Yes, that particular passion project of mine. When I came then to the Gilcrease Museum and learned that they have one of the most important collections of ancient ceramic vessels, that many of which have been used and studied for 40 and 50 years by the archaeologists as the most beautiful sort of what they would call a type. So when they call something a type, it's kind of a emblematic or an example of a vessel that you can use for comparisons and for naming a certain style, I guess you would call it. So I was happy to spend as much time as possible looking at those vessels, and it was time for me to write a grant for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, and the stars aligned for that one. Dr. Dwayne King, who was our director at the time, the wonderful man who's a Cherokee expert and scholar, he knew a great deal about that collection, and he was very interested in it also. And Dr. Bob Pickering, another curator and kind of like a deputy director at that time of the Gilcrease Museum, and Eric Singleton. They had the anthropological knowledge in order to write this grant, and then I brought in the technology side and this passion for learning more and wanting to bring in Native artists into the process. So I determined that it would be important for many reasons, for tribes, for me personally, and we also developed some software to make it easy for people to study, to review our cataloging, and to add tags and search terms from a distance, from home or from anywhere. So that's what we did. It was a 3-year project, and it turned out well. I think I was naive about a lot of elements in that project. I knew that this software would also support any NAGPRA efforts, and I think it will be very valuable for that also. I was so anxious to study the vessels that I was probably not as aware as I should have been at the time of the importance to the tribes that have these vessels as their heritage. And I certainly did not want to hurt anyone by doing this project, but I think it's turned out that it's going to be beneficial and helpful for all. And again, it can be used. All of these images and the software we made will help these tribes be able to review the ceramic vessels for repatriation as well.
And you brought in some artists, including Jerry Redcorn, whose work has so moved you.
Yes. And just being able to know her has been a great gift, such a gift. Her presence and her insights. She gave beautiful tags, descriptive terms, search terms for those objects. Of course, she knew many of them well, but shortly into the project, she said, "Diana, I don't want to tag these objects. I want to do something bigger and more important. Mm-hmm. I want to rename these objects with Caddo names for the objects that are associated with my tribe," she said, and so she used her money to help move that effort forward, and she made a beautiful Caddo festival about a year ago at the Sam Noble Museum, and the whole tribe gathered and learned from Dr. George Szabo from the University of Arkansas how these names came to be and why they needed so many names and terms, but how open the archaeologists and everyone is to welcoming new names. So the tribal chairperson and the tribal council and the tribal members who were there agreed that this is worthwhile to move forward, and hopefully she's able to get it started. It's a big project, really big project, but she's got some good support, and anything I can do to help her move forward, I would love to do as well.
Yeah, I think that's just wonderful that they're undertaking that. Just to clarify, so you work for TU at Gilcrease. You're not teaching painting at TU or anything right now.
Correct. I'm when I teach at TU, it's the more about the digital side of things, okay. And yeah.
So in 2017, which was just last year, I guess, the Southeast Indian Artists Association had that show at the Tulsa Performing Arts Gallery, which is a nice little gallery. Native Hearts Respond and Reflect was the title of it. And I wondered if you could talk about how you got involved in that show and the work you did for it, which just looked beautiful on this online.
I have been really happy to get to know these artists through the SIA group. I heard a talk by Tony Tiger, maybe the second year I had been in Tulsa, and I've been asking around, are there other artists that do abstract work? Am I the only one? I mean, where are the other ones? And Tony Tiger's name kept coming up, so I was excited to go to his talk at the Gilcrease Museum, and he mentioned that he is a member of this artist organization and how much he enjoyed the artists and that camaraderie and the work and such. So I I had his card, but by the time I was able to track him down, he was no longer at Bacone College. And so it took me a while to find him, but I finally found him and started going to the meetings. And it's been a real source of support and learning for me, really, because I feel like I'm just beginning to find my voice in Oklahoma related to my culture and history. And it's just a wonderful exploration. And they're generous, smart, kind people, good artists.
They are. They're a great group. So what new projects are you working on now?
Well, so I think I'm ready to start painting large again. I haven't done large paintings in quite a long time, partly because of space and moving around and such. And so I find that when people look at photographs of these small paintings, they expect them to be large already.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Which often surprises me, or they wish that they were large, and I think that it's difficult. It has been difficult for me to paint small, but now I've been doing it for a while, so it may be difficult to go large again. But I think I'm ready. So
that'll be a fun undertaking.
I'll say one other thing. The other happy discovery at the Gilcrease Museum has been in the archives, because there are papers related to my family in the archives as well. David Folsom, I think I mentioned earlier, was my 2 times great-grandfather. So there are a number of letters between him and Peter Pitchlynn. And Peter Pitchlynn has a Folsom in his heritage as well, so he's a cousin. And then there are also letters of my great-grandfather, who was a Choctaw judge in Caddo, which is where my father was born and raised. So it's really, really interesting to begin to see those and explore them and maybe do something with them or with phrases from them. I love the work that many Native artists do with these older documents. Shan Goshorn's work is beautiful, and others who might paint over the works. So I'm not sure what form that would take, but I have a few printed out that I'm playing with. So.
Oh, that sounds neat. We'll look forward to that. I wanted to ask you just a little bit more about your approach and practices. So are you painting on masonite sometimes?
So sometimes I paint on canvas and sometimes on wood. Sometimes masonite, but I don't like that surface quite as much. Masonite's a little bit too
slick,
hard. Yeah, slick for me. Yeah. So, and often it's a kind of a combination where I'll have a hard surface and then wrap it with canvas because I do like the softness and the way the paint is accepted by canvas. I usually prime my canvases. This painting is on unprimed canvas. I did some experimenting in college or just after college, where I painted on canvas that was partly primed, partly unprimed, because the flow and the absorption is so different. So play with that a little bit too.
Right. And I was kind of glad to hear you use the term flow, because I know a curator used that term to describe your work, and she kind of meant using brushes to push that pigment, I guess, and acrylic, and in your case sometimes clay or soil around. So do you think that's a good way to describe your approach?
I think I am a flow painter. I really love to flood the canvas or the wood with paint, and I might move it around by tilting the canvas or the board around, or sometimes maybe use a squeegee, or sometimes I'll use a sort of a textured instrument that you use for cutting onions. I'm not sure the name of it, but it just has tines that gives you lines, parallel lines. So so the flow can happen in different ways, but yes, I really, really love that.
How do you think your palette has changed over the years, or palette?
I'm trying to
Your
say
colors, yes.
I've always really liked strong color. I think working with the star paintings, I've had a tendency to somewhat emulate colors that you see in the sky. Right now, I'm really interested in shifting my color palette so that it's more, so it's even stronger and maybe less natural. We'll see. The last few paintings I've done, I've started with a flat, either hot pink color or a flat purple color, or a flat kind of bright orange color. So we'll see where that leads.
Interesting. How important is drawing to you? Do you spend any time drawing?
I do little sketches in small notebooks here and there, but I also really like accident. So I will, for the Woman's River paintings, for example, I will do the female shape, do the sketch, and then I'll usually blow it up to the size of the canvas, and then usually cut the shape out, and then pour on the clay or saltillo, or sometimes I use dry wood quack sealer as well for the earth formations. And then after that dries, then I may or may not paint the earth formations a bit, and then flood it with paint, and then paint more over that. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Forget what the question was.
Yeah, what you're doing with your sketching and
yes.
how big a
So
role it plays.
I like the role of accident, and I like to look at the first layers, and then I stand them up in the studio for a long time and see what it says to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very much an approach of maybe like de Kooning or some of the abstract expressionists. I like to see what emerges from the paintings, and so they usually are very different from what I think they would be when I started out.
So are you kind of letting them sit, because you may, depending on what you're getting from that, come back to it?
Yes. They take really a long time for me to do, partly because I'm working probably during the day, but I'm slow. I think I'm really slow at it, and I think that I have made mistakes and not done very well when I have tried to rush and finish a painting and just put it in a show, and it's usually terrible. So I have to really be careful of that. It has to sit for a long time and percolate, and it needs to be interesting to me on many levels. It needs to be interesting in a kind of a bold, contrasting, compositional way, but there also needs to be enough variation in shape and color and design and ideas to keep you interested or hold your interest over a period of time, and that takes time to build up those layers and let ideas or colors peek through. And
so will you work on a couple of pieces simultaneously?
I do,
because they
yes.
have the different
At least
setting
two.
them.
Yes, at least two.
What is your creative process from the time that you get an idea? So kind of walk us through that.
So it's kind of what I was talking about before, like with these paintings that are done from the Pawnee star map. I find an area of the star map that I like, and I do some painstaking work of making the stars. Do the stars first, and I'm still experimenting with using mica. I think because mica was a material that we used and our ancient ancestors used, it's important to me, and I think it's beautiful. I like it both when it's in a little teeny glittery like form, but also the big pieces of mica and sheets of mica. So I'll cut out the shapes, and maybe if it's a different composition, maybe play with them on the canvas, and then start pouring and flooding. And I also look at simultaneously. I look at photographs of the universe and of the sky, and different events or different parts of the sky. I love the looking at images of dying stars and those kind of explosions. And I love the concept that those elements go out into the universe and then they're swept up to make new stars and for the birth of stars. And so I love that concept. And I like to try to allude to that through the flooding, kind of explosive nature of the pouring of the paint. So
You don't have a telescope yourself?
I don't. It's probably a good thing to do.
Another layer of work
because
the photographs
are so much closer.
and they have such wonderful equipment.
And we have so much of our city lights that make it difficult to see very much, but that would be a good thing to do.
Well, looking back at your career so far, what do you think was a fork in the road for you, where you could have gone one way and you sort of picked this other road?
In terms of the painting direction, that's a really good question. Certainly, I think working at the LA County Museum of Art and living in Los Angeles was a really, really important and move that gave me a great education in the arts. Just working there, talking to the curators at the copy machine was enriching, and we had beautiful conversations about art and being able to look at the art at any time. And I love art from all periods and cultures. And because it's an encyclopedic museum, I was able to kind of immerse myself in great work, great art from every time period and culture, and really think about things in that way, and and getting to know. So the artist community there was very meaningful and supportive. My work as well. I tended to be more reclusive, I think, in San Diego, and a little more and shy. But I got more involved with other artists in Los Angeles, as well as working at the museum. Really helped my work get better, I think.
What would you say has been one of the high points of your career so far?
Gosh, well, the working with the Korean artists and the shows in Korea have been high points for me. Being here in Oklahoma feels like it's a high point, actually. I'm learning about my past and about ideas that are really important to me, and it almost feels like my work has been about Native ideas all along, but I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. So it's a real feeling of coming home.
Mm-hmm. And how about a low point?
Certainly have been low points, just trying to slog away and keep making art and making a living no matter what. I'd say a couple different shows or things that I've done where I tried to rush the paintings and just put them in even though they hadn't percolated or had the time needed to develop fully. I think those those are difficult times. And I've been, somewhat independent. Not having children, I never really kind of got that part of my life together. But my paintings have been my children, I think. So, and my niece and nephew. So.
Is there anything that we've forgotten to talk about that you would like to add?
Gosh, I don't know. I'll probably think of something tomorrow, since I'm so slow. I'm kind of it takes me a long time. My paintings are slow, my ideas are slow to evolve, but but I think they have some depth, and maybe that's why.
Well, we're very glad to have you in Oklahoma now.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
We're going to pause it for a minute, Diana, and take a look at your paintings real quickly.
Okay.
So, would you like to tell us about this painting, Diana?
This is a painting that I love the way it turned out. It's from a section of the Pawnee Star Map, and I feel that it represents the understanding that we as native peoples have had of the universe and our connection to the stars through their depictions and understanding for generations, so many generations. So this is, the stars are made with mica flakes, and then I experimented with pouring paint using different oils as well as acrylic paint, and just poured and scrubbed and flooded and washed it off and scrubbed and poured, and then it ended up like this. So
yeah, it's just got a nice movement and flow to it. Where do you sign your paintings? How do you handle your signature?
So I don't like to sign on the front. I like to sign on the back. I feel that signatures interrupt the flow and composition of a painting.
Mm-hmm. And how about this next painting?
This painting is also related to the ancient depiction of stars. The symbol in the center is more of a sun symbol, and I relate to that as an ancient Choctaw symbol, and so I am showing an explosion of color and light emitting from that ancient symbol.
Yeah, that really is very visible there. Okay, and we've got another painting here.
This painting also uses the sun symbol, the ancient shape representing the sun, that I feel closely aligns with Choctaw iconography. And this is a painting that I started with a flat color of hot pink in this one. And as I'm experimenting towards using stronger color, but I do like to have those colors come out in hints. And so I then layered other shapes. There's another larger sun shape. Oh, I put my hand in front of the camera.
That's
okay. Larger sun shape as well, that kind of larger circular shape that is interwoven with the flooded turquoise color. And then I went in with alcohol and some other materials to add drops that would hint at other star or planet-like shapes as well.
Oh, that just turned out wonderfully, I think, too.
Oh, thank you. I like it too. Oh, and I find it quite fascinating that both of my parents' families moved to San Diego at nearly the same time. My father's family, who at that time were living in West Texas, struggling and needed jobs, so they moved to San Diego in 1942 to work in the airplane factories. They've been back and forth. They moved earlier in 1929 to pick fruit in the Imperial Valley, but went back to Texas. So when they came in 1942, they were able to get jobs in the airplane factories, and my father joined the Navy. And my mother's family moved from West Texas also to San Diego in 1943. And so they met at the Southern Baptist Church, and I find it so ironic that they were from this region, and my grandparents from right around Tulsa, and they met in San Diego. It was wonderful.
And you're back here.
And now I'm back. Yes.
More convergences.
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.